It's the Rip City Wrap-Up, brought to you by Dick Hanna Subaru. Believe in nice. Here are your hosts, Tyree Smith, Deni Marang, and Joe Simons.
Happy Monday to all! I just realized it's Monday, which means we got a long week ahead, but there's Blazers this week, folk. Welcome in to Rip City Wrap-Up episode 66, sponsored by the good people at Dick Hanna Subaru. I know, episode 66 is insane. Comes fast, brother. Deni Avdija, Tyree Smith, Joe Simons with you after the Blazers fall on the road, which 30 to 120 behind Deni Avdija, coming back with 34 points. Gentlemen, feelings after tonight's game? What's up? What's up?
I'm very pleased with the performance, considering this was 9 cities, 9 games. Yeah. You had the 1 game at home, but you're essentially playing a 9-game road trip. You're coming off a back-to-back. Clearly, Deni was the freshest guy in the building, and he looked like it. But proud of the effort from the Blazers tonight. Like, Golden State had a lot of weird things have to happen for this game to occur. It's kind of the same thing that we saw in Boston, and the same thing that we saw to a degree last night. Portland gets down. They get back in the game. They get it to that 4 to 7 point margin, and they're 1 50-50 ball away, 1 live ball turnover away, 1 big 3 away from really getting back into the game, and they just couldn't do it against Golden State. And every time Golden State capitalized on the opportunity, and the lead would swell back out.
It's kind of poignant, though. You highlight the Boston game, and I think even the Cleveland game falls in that category. You get these games where the veteran team, they just the finer points. That's where it shows up. And even when teams are tired, the Detroit Pistons last night, they're playing on a back-to-back. They came up with just enough to stretch it out against a tired Blazers team. But like those are the little things. And I mean, tonight the Blazers finished with 19 turnovers, and so many of them were of the ball variety. And I think a lot of that comes from a lack of concentration, and not in the sense of like they didn't care, but guys are tired. It's 9 games in 9 cities in 15 days. It's a brutal stretch for any team, young, old, otherwise. But you just have to stay focused. You have to stay locked in. You have to have all those opportunities that materialize, that you need to come out with more of them. You need to take better care of the ball when the opportunity arises for you to capitalize on some of those mistakes that the Warriors made, because they had 17 turnovers as well. But in those 50-50 instances, the one Steph came up with in the corner, swing, it leads to a 3. The loose ball, Gary Payton tracks down, it bounces back out, Moses Moody gets to the rim and 1. And just these little moments of like, the Blazers could have cut it to 4 or 5 instead of 7 or 8. And it's just those little swings are enough just to keep that lack of pressure on the Warriors and make a veteran team have to execute down the stretch.
Look, Steph went 5 of 11 from 3, which is not a bad defensive performance from Portland. Gary Payton, I'm glad he didn't get it tonight. He certainly tried a few times. Yeah. Jacket went up from like 42 feet, I think, with about a half minute left. Sorry, Steph. Gary Payton led this team in field goal attempts and points tonight.
Yeah.
Not Gary Payton. Gary Payton II.
Yeah. How hard was it for you to say that?
Reviled here in Rip City.
Yeah. It's funny.
When that happens, Dan, you know it's not going to be your night.
No. I mean, and Steph was still, I mean, you could probably knock 3 of those 3s off for Steph. And as far as the attempts go, he was basically 5 for 8. Like, he just seemingly, it was kind of funny. He hit his 5th 3, and they throw it up on the board. Steph Curry, 5 made 3s, then I'm like, that's weird. It feels like he's hit 13.
Yeah.
Like, it just, the timeliness of
loud.
Steph Curry 3s are always loud. He's about to hit 4,000 in his career. It is a lot of 3s, man. I mean, it's just, it's difficult to overcome this kind of team. Even though you hold Jimmy Butler to 15 points, he finishes with a triple-double because he's that much of an impactful player. But if Gary Payton is going to give you 26 and Moses Moody, is going to give you 20, you've got to have the other guys chip in. And unfortunately, you know, WAP and DB go 1 of 10 off the bench. You do get a nice performance from Jabari Walker, continues the hot shooting.
Kept him in the game there in the 4th.
Just enough right there, 3 of 3. But it's a lot more fun. It's a lot more interesting to talk about this game, even though they fall, and it's not an excuse or anything like that. But the positive storylines, and this isn't like, you know, trying to find it. There were some incredibly great storylines and massive production from guys tonight. Deni is rightfully getting a ton of praise for his performance tonight. 11 of 15, just buried everything at the rim. but also 5 of 7 from 3, also 7 of 7 from the free throw line, grabs 16 rebounds, has 6 assists. The 6 turnovers, I think a couple of those late were trying to force some action and trying to create some things that weren't there, which, again, Deni's still only 24. He's still incredibly young, but I mean, he has been so fun. It was kind of funny. Joe and I were talking, and he's like, hey, what's Deni's career high? And I was like, I know he's got at least 35. And I had forgotten he had 43 last year for the Wizards in February when he kind of got unleashed down the stretch. And you're like, is 15 his career high for rebounding? I'm like, no, it's 20. Deni's he's one of the best rebounding wings in the league. So while he's
double in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, 16 rebounds is his second best rebounding night of his career. He has 20, and then he has, I want to say, 5 or 6 games in. He's a very, very, very good rebounder. I mean, and tonight he finishes with 15 defensive rebounds.
Yeah.
And you could see his force because the Blazers didn't struggle to score in the paint tonight. Now, the Warriors had 46 in the paint, which you don't want to be outscored by the Warriors in the paint because they're not a paint team typically, but that is the Jimmy Butler change. You know, that's the rim gravity. That's what he brings to the team. And his additional gravity opposite of Steph makes you worry about multiple actions, which allows Steph to get freed up. It allows Moses Moody to get freed up. It allows Gary Payton finish basically everything at the rim and knock down his threes because you're worried about those guys. And they haven't had that kind of gravity since they had KD. And so, look, the Warriors, that trade it's working for them. It is they are
12-2 now since they got Jimmy.
Yeah, they are very good. It is not a team you want to play in the playoffs with that level of veteran guile and talent and skill. But
what did you expect? I'm curious what was kind of the expectation going into a veteran team after essentially how we talked about yesterday it was essentially a road game. Should have been a road game. Should have just stayed on the road, coming back one time and then getting back on the road. I feel like that just messed up the entire schedule for this team in terms of freshness, availability. And when you're going against a Golden State Warriors team that since the trade is now top 5 in the league, at least that's how people are around and saying in terms of offense, defense.
Yeah.
You didn't expect
I mean,
a great show.
It was a 12-point spread tonight, which Blazers covered.
Yeah, I mean,
tough.
Love that.
It's a really good point, Terry, because you're not playing the 6th team in the West. You're playing one of the 5 best teams in the NBA as of right now.
Yeah.
They're towards the back half of that, but still, this is a much different team than we saw at the start of the season. And Portland was game tonight. And if you go in tonight and say, hey, if Gary Payton beats us, Gary Payton beats us. Whoops, Gary Payton beat the Blazers.
It was the second quarter that beat the Blazers.
Absolutely.
They're down 27-35 after one, but it's a 33-22 second quarter. The Blazers outscored the Warriors in the second half. Was it by 8? 9. So, I mean, they have 43-point third quarter, and they go toe for toe for 28 in the fourth. It was that second quarter, and that was the lack of bench production. And I'm not putting the game on WAP and Delano. It's just that's the nature of the beast.
It's a lot to ask.
It is, but that's also part of being shorthanded, and that's what the Blazers are. They don't have Jeremy. They don't have DA. They don't have Rob. And yes, everybody, the totem that Jeremy is. He's everything bad with the team, the franchise, blah, blah, blah. It's like, but it gives you... It pushes everybody else back a spot. Like now you've got somebody else coming off the bench as opposed to Delano or WAP.
Right, or DA being down, who would have been impactful in this game.
Yes.
Like you have players that are more used to getting those big minutes in these moments.
The execution stuff.
And yeah, it's cool to see Bari have this nice run of knocking down threes. Is it sustainable over the long haul? Probably not.
No.
But it's nice to get these spot minutes. It's just when you have a situation like this, like we all loved WAP, but it's been a rough shooting from the outside the last few nights, and you knocked down a couple of those threes.
In both games, and it changes.
Especially the Detroit game. But you're talking about going 0-2 in these games and potentially 2-0 or even just splitting, and it changes your fortune of where you are in the Western Conference right now.
And we also haven't got a chance to talk about Anthony. I mean, he had a very silent 32 points. I mean, obviously overshadowed by Deni's 34. But Anthony tonight, I enjoyed his game. I thought he was trying to take over a little bit towards the end, which in a way... He was the reason too.
He had 10,
needed to.
10 points in 90 seconds to start the third quarter.
To open the second half.
And he should have.
It was like, oh, there he is. And it was the Inferno type situation where the ball wasn't touching the net. And you even said, you're like, I feel like Ant maybe should have taken over even a little bit more because the flip side was Ant finished with 13 points in the third quarter, but Deni had 16. Like those two guys gave you 29 points in the quarter.
It sounds insane because they got 43 in the quarter, but as much as Ant was cooking, I'm like, could they have put up a 50-burger in that quarter if they got it to Ant a few more times? Because he had a few heat checks. And, yeah, Tyree, Ant has been pretty good over the last week now. Like, we've gotten a significant stretch of time with Ant really being impactful offensively. doing it on the defensive side as well. And you mentioned Jeremy, Dan. Ant, I think, has gotten the ire of Blazer fans, too, in the same way. It's like, hey, if we are not going to make the playoffs, and if we're not going to be a competitive team, why aren't we playing all the young kids? Why isn't Scoot starting and getting 40 minutes? As opposed to just saying, Ant is giving you production, Scoot is coming off the bench. Both of them are doing well. It's good to have the Batman and Robin situation. Like, Scoot has fallen into his role in this team incredibly well. Part of that is Anthony Simons taking some of the burden off of him from the point guard perspective. It really helps a lot.
Over the last 10 games, Ant's averaging 35 minutes, 25, 4 and 4 on 47, 38, 100 splits. He has not missed a free throw. In that same period, Shaedon Sharpe is playing 32 minutes a night. Deni's playing 29. Scoot's playing 27. Tumani's playing 34. Donovan Clingan's playing 23 minutes. Like, everybody's playing, everybody's contributing. You're getting these opportunities up and down. Shaedon's averaging 20 a game. Deni's averaging 18 a game. Jeremy's at 14. Scoot's at 14. Tumani's at 12. Like, the only thing that has really changed, and you're kind of seeing it bear out in some of these games, is over the last 10 games, when they were really cooking, the three-point shooting was just firing on all cylinders for everybody on the Blazers. And really right now, the only guy that's doing that outside of Bari, who's on smaller volume, is Ant. Ant's shooting what he should be shooting, which on 10 threes a night, he's hitting 38%. Like, he had a little bit of a period, not a little bit. His first month of the season was tough, and over the last couple of weeks, I've seen the notes on Scoot Henderson was basically had tied Anthony Simons as the team lead in 3-point percentage, which is a tip of the cap to Scoot and how he's found his 3-point shot. But it also showed you that Ant had to dig himself out of quite the hole to kind of get going. But Ant has been phenomenal over the last 10 games. I don't think you can say that any other way. Shaedon has been very good. And even though this was a down night for Shaedon from the field, but
Big butt,
big butts matter here.
We love big butts.
We do.
On the Rip City Wrap Up. If you love big butts, use the hashtag RC and let us know what you think.
There's a reason we like them. Stable, foundational.
It matters. It's very functional. But Shaedon almost messed around and had a triple-double.
Yeah.
He finishes with 9 points, 8 assists, 7 rebounds. Now, the 5 turnovers, him and Deni were the two guys that lost the ball a few times. And like Deni, I think they were more turnovers of aggression, where Shaedon in this is the number one thing that Shaedon needs to work on in his offensive game. It's tightening his handle. He dribbles into traffic, and his handle's not tight enough to be able to kind of bob and weave all the way through just yet. I kind of want to see him where Scoot Henderson is a guy that I want to see him keep his dribble live. I want to see Shaedon basically pick the ball up the second a foot touches the paint, and because
just glide.
It'll cause him to be forceful.
Sure.
Like, don't try to keep your dribble alive, man. Like, just pick it up, go. Like, it's not that simple, and I'm not saying that he should do that every time, but like, I think that's more of a mentality thing of like, hey, I want to be able to work my way there and then have more opportunities.
What's going to get him into trouble less?
Yes.
It's that, because the handle is the thing where a lot of these turnovers happen, and those live ball turnovers happen too. It's the devastating ones, the ones that lead to points on the other end.
Yeah, I mean, the Blazers outscored 20-12 in fast break points, which it wasn't brutal, but there was something that Chauncey Billups said at the end of the game in the press availability that stood out to me is, if we have a game where we beat an opponent on the glass and we have 30 assists, you've got to have a pretty special performance to beat us. And he's right. And the Warriors did. Now, the Blazers hit 18 of 42 threes, which is great. But the Warriors were 21 of 41 from three, and those 3 made threes. It's a 10-point game. Like, that's the difference. And they shoot over 50% from three, 53% from the field. And you kind of go back to the whole points in the paint thing. That was the difference in the game, is the Warriors barely squeak out the win in the points in the paint, and they barely squeak out the win in the 3-point category, and that's kind of how this goes. But the Blazers, if they take better care of the ball tonight, they probably walk away with a win, and that's why I think you come out of this game, even though it's a loss, and I know a lot of people are actively kind of rooting for those at this point in time, but it was a good performance where you had Ant play incredibly well. Shaedon, despite poor shooting, plays really well and finds other ways to impact the game. Deni has a monster night, and Donovan Clingan left a lot on the floor as far as like where he could have succeeded and still put up 15, 9, 6, and 4.
Yeah, what was the company? It was Clyde.
Clyde and Haberstroh had it at the end of the game. I can't
Wallace,
remember.
I believe.
Yeah, Sheed.
Yeah,
Wallace,
Absolutely.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
And this is kind of what we were talking about early in the season.
So to finish that thought real quick, his line tonight, only Sheed and Clyde have done that in Blazers history. So good company, despite, like you said, leaving some food on the table.
Yeah, he did, and that's a promising thing for a rookie. And we talked about, and this is not to poo-poo Scoot Henderson, like Scoot not having those performances in his rookie year. Donovan's had half dozen of these now, where like you go, that's a pretty good box score, and you could tell there were times where he made a mistake and he fumbled the ball or wasn't able to corral a rebound or didn't finish around on an and one. Like this very easily could have been for Donovan, a 22-14 night, and you're just sitting there like 22, 14, 6 and 4, like, ooh, and it just kind of, those are good reinforcing feelings, like in a night where he could have had more and he was still that productive.
Well, that's the thing, Tyree. It feels like we're already at a point with Donovan where we nitpick his game a little bit because we can see the amount of space that he takes up. Mm-hmm. And he has an impressive line like this, and you see the stats, and you're like, but if he could just do this thing, if he just had a little bit softer hands, and if he was just a little more forceful in finishing through contact, and we're doing that not to pick on the kid,
but because he's capable.
We're seeing exactly he's capable of it, and we know that there's going to be so much room for growth and potential, and it's very exciting that this kid has played 50-ish games so far because he missed that little stretch, and he's already showing signs like this. And yeah, the stat line is great, but
the most important thing is the minutes played tonight.
The minutes played,
he showed that he could do it tonight.
I actually thought you were going to say something else because one of the other important things about Donovan is he's a little bit of a bleepity bleep. Like,
oh, look.
Donovan has that in him, and he's mixing it up with Green, and he's mixing it up with guys down low. And when the challenge went his way, he was kind of looking at guys and laughing a little bit.
Talked a little S to Quentin Post of like, yeah, that's what I thought.
We had, like, in the beginning of the year, it was an identity and style of basketball. The Blazers have kind of figured that out, right? Yep. They're defensive. They're going to get out and run. And then it was, okay, what is the sort of the spiritual vibe of this team? And it's kind of nasty. You look at two, and you could read his lips when Curry tried to get him on a back cut. He, mouthed some words, and Deni being a psycho that he is, and lovingly, and then Donovan performing the way that he does and being nasty.
He had two moments tonight, Donovan.
Yeah.
He had the tie-up where, was it Gui Santos tried to rip the ball away from him at the when the foul was called, and Donovan was like, no, give me that. And Gui started to kind of like bow up and really dig in there, and Draymond just kind of grabbed Donovan, like, please don't kill my little man.
I remember that.
Please don't kill him. Because, look, Donovan had that look in his eye of like, I'm going to smash you if you don't get off me. And then I don't know what got into Gary Payton II and what world he thought he was living on. Look,
it was obscene.
He was hooping, but the idea that he thought he was going to cram on Donovan Clingan in that moment.
His face.
I mean, Donovan looked at him like, brother, are you okay? Like,
wasn't gonna
you
happen.
never had a chance. Like, it was never there. And he just kind of stood over him like, and there's a little bit of like.
It was almost like when you asked Donovan Clingan about Block Lobster.
Yeah.
He had sort of the same look on his face, like, I'm confused by all of this right now. But Gary, it almost seemed like lost a little bit of heart on the way up. Because, like, he's like, I'm having the night of my life against my former team. Watch what I'm going to do. And then he kind of sees Donovan as he's ascending in the air. And he lost the ball. And I think that was maybe a split-second business decision of, I don't want to get packed into the floor.
Yeah,
because
he hit the ground in a heap. That was the kind of thing. And the other thing that I've noticed from Donovan, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. I talked to him about this when I had him on the podcast the other day.
What podcast?
Jack Ramsey's. Available on YouTube. Don't go there now. Stay
Wait,
here.
40 minutes.
I was about to say, wait a minute. You still haven't heard from Dick Hanna yet. Keep going.
No. But just talking to him about screening and his relationship with different players and understanding, and he's like, with Ant, it is such a different style, and this is why I talk about Ant the way that I do in as far as like how teams treat him. And I know fans feel a certain way about Ant versus Scoot or Shaden or whatever. The way opposing coaching staffs treat Anthony Simons is just drastically different than they treat any other player on the Blazers because of his gravity and how hot he can get and how dangerous he is from beyond the three-point line. And Donovan, when I asked him, I'm like, what's kind of the difference and what are the things you kind of look for? He's like, I know guys are going to trap and blitz, and I have to be very certain that I set a hard screen so if they do, it gives Ant a split second, and I know I need to get out of there, and I need to dive hard if they're going to trap or blitz or hedge, because I know that they have to boogie out there to get to him and contest a shot. But if I feel like they're going to try to get over and I can get my hip in front of them, play uphill, and really deny them. And I thought in the Detroit game, I mentioned this last night, the 2 fouls that he got called for on the moving screens, I use air quotes sarcastically because they weren't moving screens. I went back and watched them. They were just bone-shattering screens, and I don't think the refs are used to him yet.
I'm big. This is what happens when I make contact, but it looks like a foul because there's such force occurring.
Because you see somebody's face mash up against their shoulder buckle. He caught Moses Moody tonight with one that Ant had. I mean, he could have just checked his watch, checked the wind, let it go. It was like, yeah, you're not getting over that screen. And Donovan is getting very good at understanding that particular relationship. Scoot's still trying to learn how and where to manipulate because sometimes they'll under him, sometimes they'll over him. He's not able to kind of dictate the coverage quite as well yet, and so Donovan has to be a little bit more flexible on those screen coverages, but he's getting better at it. And he goes, and Shaden, he really likes to turn the corner and then assess and kind of snake the screen and get into it. And I have to learn to play a little bit slower on my dive there so that I can keep the big man next to me. And you can see him those are the little things in a season when you're talking about development, particularly for young players, that it doesn't show up in the box score at all outside of the NBA.com hustle stats, like what you see screen assists. David Locke, the radio play-by-play for the Jazz, really emphasized screen assists when talking about Rudy Gobert, because Rudy Gobert was a rim finisher and a guy who freed up Donovan Mitchell. And I've comped Donovan to Gobert in that same vein because he's going to be a cleanup guy, he's going to be a lob guy, he's going to be a dive guy, but him freeing up Scoot, Shaden, Deni, Ant, that's where his bread is going to get buttered.
And you also I want to give a little bit of defense to Donovan. Y'all talked about the minutes that he played, which is exactly what people have been wanting him to play, at least over 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. All of it wasn't made a great 30 minutes, but also Donovan's coming off a back-to-back. Donovan is also, without DeAndre Ayton, without Rob Williams, playing a little bit by himself in terms of the center that we're going to have on the court. And also, man, he was just tired. I mean, he was just tired. You give him the credit that he was able to do tonight, at least able to get 7 points. I mean, not 7 points, I apologize, 15 points on the board. But you also just realize that he's understanding a little bit more in terms of where he's going to put his energy to. And I just think overall, a lot of the comments are talking about how Donovan kind of had brick hands tonight and a little bit, he needed help. He needed help. He was doing it all his own. And you got to give credit to the rookie. I think he had a pretty good game despite being one of the, without DeAndre Ayton.
No, I mean, this performance is phenomenal. If this is like the questionable, hey, he should be better here, he's better, you're getting 15, 9, 6, and 4. Put that on the board every single night.
Just picking things
out. He played in San Francisco against the Warriors, and he didn't get run off the floor. Let's start there for being excited, and we can work up.
Against a big who in Quentin Post has been huge for them this year and adds that layer and forces Donovan Clingan to be uncomfortable because he's got to be out at three-point line. And that's another thing Donovan mentioned was I'm still getting used to the idea of NBA spacing and what teams do.
Yeah, dude.
He's like, I'm 7'3", man. I don't want to be out there.
Right. And a lot of teams implore a stretch five. He wasn't doing that. Is UConn still in the Big East? What conference are they in anymore? Okay, great.
So
still in the Big East.
But I mean, college spacing, number one, the line's in closer. Number two, there's no 3-second rule. And
different ballgame.
Not only that, the viability of three-point shooting, even among good three-point shooting teams, just isn't that great. So Donovan's just living in the paint, and there's going to be a transitionary period, particularly for any big in the NBA. But a big that is as big as Donovan Clingan. It's funny. Mari Sankofa, who covers the Detroit Pistons, he was like, he makes Jalen Duren look like a wing, and it's like. It's funny hearing opponent beat reporters when they see Donovan for the first time. They're just like, "Boy, that guy's really big." He's that is a skill. It is a talent to be that big and have that kind of impact. And that's kind of like in a night like tonight. It's nice to see.
He's good at being big.
Yeah,
he's big and he's nice. Kind of like some of the Subarus they got at Dick Hanna Subaru. Joe, Talk to us a little bit about what they got going on, brother.
Well, Tyree, it is the perfect time to check out the new 2025 Subaru models rolling in every day over at Dick Anna Subaru. Subaru delivers with that lifetime powertrain warranty on every new car, Dan. You heard of that?
I have.
Yeah, experience nice in the car business over at Dick Anna Subaru. Believe in nice. Visit them today and see why a Subaru is perfect for the season. And your next big assist is time for a deep dive into a shallow topic. That's right. It's Trend BA.
Trend BA, we go to the Blazer box. I mean, y'all talk about bench points. I know a team that basically didn't have one. Let's talk about the Dallas Mavericks.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Jason Kidd, following the game against the Suns, he was talking about, I've never seen this. Can't take someone out to rest because we had no one to put in. Mavs only had 7 players available for that game, essentially on the court at one point against the Phoenix Suns.
Well, having 7 players in the court at one point, that'd be nice.
Right?
You guys all 7. The Blazers did employ that in one game. They had 6 and got away with it. It was a fun little moment. But this is Jason Kidd's coward. Jason Kidd's coward. You know why?
Tell us.
Former Mavs legend Don Nelson, who was the coach of the Warriors at that point in time, the last game of the regular season in April of 2010, I know this because I was in the building and it was hilarious, opened the game with 6 players. 6 players. 6. Excuse me, 7. Active players. One of them was active and physically unable to play. It was Ronnie Turioff, if I remember right.
The legend.
Yes. Devin George fouled out after another player got hurt during the game. And they were down to 4 players. And Don Nelson looked at the bench, looked at the ref, looked at the bench, went back and forth like, guys, I have 4 players. So a very rare occurrence where the Warriors were assessed a technical foul and Devin George was allowed to return to the game for the Warriors, and every foul that he was going to occur from then on would not only be free throws, but also a technical foul. So, boo on you, Jason Kidd. Don Nelson, the legend, did it with even less players.
All right. So
it was hilarious because Don Nelson, I remember completely losing his mind of like, this can't get any worse than this. It's crazy to think that just a few years later, that franchise would have Steph, Clay, and Draymond.
I thought you were going to say just a few years later how unstressed and crazy Don Nelson then became.
Yeah, no, he went to
guy
Hawaii and opened up a weed farm.
Enjoying his
Is that
life.
what he did?
Yeah.
Google Don Nelson in Hawaii.
Yeah, I mean,
it is awesome.
Don, you watching
Yeah.
tonight?
I think it was like a Real Sports story about it, and I'm like, oh my God, my guy is just hanging out in Margaritaville and just doing his thing.
He loves his weed and his pineapple.
I mean, he grinded in the NBA for 5 decades, so go with God. But to get
Mavs
back
might
to
be that way too.
Dude, the Mavericks won tonight. They won an NBA basketball game tonight, which puts Portland in
the
a
exact same spot we were.
challenging spot.
I was about to say, was it that big of a difference, brother?
The Suns lost in crippling fashion to the Grizzlies again. They lost to the Grizzlies 2, maybe 3 weeks ago, 148-151 in overtime, which if you score 148 points and lose, I got nothing
Tough
for you.
noogies.
I mean, that's
figure
an
it out later.
insane way to lose. But so the Suns beat the Mavericks the other night, and now the Suns lose and the Mavericks win as the Blazers lose. And so you look at the standings, and the Blazers are how many games back now?
Go to that Blazer box, Uncle Phil.
They're 5 games back.
So they're 5 games back, and they're 6 games back of Sacramento. They don't have the tiebreaker with Dallas. They would have the tiebreaker with Sacramento. So basically, Portland has to make up 6 games in 16 games. 6 and 16 is what they have to make up. Now, here's the good news, guys. They got Toronto and Washington coming up.
We did this last night. We got to 7.
I wasn't here for this, so let's do this.
So that's a win, that's a loss. And we said that there's 7 games of the final 16 games that I would say that there are 5 that they're favored in. 5 that they're favored in, squint 6.
Yeah.
7.
I think the Atlanta game we quibbled over.
Yes. So I don't think they'll be favored because they'll be on the road.
Fair.
Beyond that, basically 9 to 10 of the games they have remaining, they're going to be underdogs, and in a lot of them sizable underdogs.
Well, we've said this from the jump. Ever since Portland got into the race for a 10 seed, The Blazers are taking care of teams that they're supposed to.
They're better than the bad teams very clearly.
But they're not as good as the good teams. And you heard Casey Holdahl, intrepid Blazers reporter, ask the question of Chauncey. I thought it was a smart one because it's probably what a lot of fans are thinking. It's cool to be very competitive with these good teams. Like, there is a floor that you've gotten to of we're kind of competing with the upper echelon of the NBA in the last 10 days.
What this schedule has been for
Absolutely.
the last 2 weeks.
Like, you've been game against Boston, against Cleveland,
OKC was the only game.
Detroit. OKC was the only game, ironically, and none of the OKC top-tier players played in that game.
And really, it was a 5 to 6 minute stretch for OKC in the middle of the fourth quarter.
That was about it.
Still a battle.
Yeah.
That was about it. So Portland, to climb back in this, has to beat teams that they're not supposed to. And they've not been able to do that yet. And now, time is just not on their side.
I mean, you have a 4-game stretch. They have 7 games at home. They're going to come back and they're going to face the New York Knicks. And they're not going to have Jalen Brunson. And after the Knicks, you have the Raptors and Wizards. After that, you have maybe your most difficult stretch of games when you're talking about premier teams in the league. Now, Memphis Grizzlies are going to be without Jaren Jackson. He's very likely not going to be playing until the end of the regular season. Hopefully they get him back because he suffered a high ankle sprain. The Nuggets just beat the brakes off the Thunder tonight, and I thought it was very interesting that after Shea had a 40-piece, we were talking about, oh, the MVP race is over. Jokic went for 35, 18, and 10, or 18 and 8, I think, tonight. He was just off a 35, 20, and 10 game. We didn't hear those same echoes, which I thought was very interesting.
Do we want to pause and have that conversation real quick, the MVP conversation?
Well.
I know we'll have it when we play Denver, but it's Michael Malone, right? We can't call him Mike Malone? Yeah. Okay. Michael Malone, coach.
He doesn't like it.
He doesn't like it.
Doesn't like Mike.
I know. Let's not be so sensitive.
It started in the 2019 playoffs.
I remember that was a thing when we played that series. So, because I agree with his philosophy, if you take Jokic's stats, and he has never won an MVP award before.
You just don't know the name. You just see the points, rebounds, assists, field goal percentage, like all of the analytics.
I think that you can just you can take the names, Danny, and let's just say he never won one before, and SGA never won one. This is a landslide in favor of Jokic, and it's not a slide against SGA. He's having an MVP season. The fact that he is favored or even in a 1-2 with Jokic, who's having this kind of season, is an incredible, impressive accomplishment. I just think that you cannot look at what Jokic has done this season and not say it's one of the all-time, like it is a special MVP season.
It's better than his other MVP seasons.
And basketball writers, they like to have narratives and be in control of this stuff. And here's the problem. We're going to look back on this season 10 years from now when we're evaluating Jokic's career and say, how the hell did the people who are responsible for these decisions not pick him? It's irresponsible.
It's LeBron James when he should have won
Absolutely.
over James Harden. And it's
Absolutely.
Look, Harden had an incredibly... Look, I'll just say this. Who's the best player on the planet?
It's Jokic.
Okay. I don't want to see the creation of more awards, but I think I've reached the point because we have these different definitions of MVP, and you saw this. I think you saw the same thing in the NFL, the Lamar Josh Allen debate.
Right. Who means more to their team? Who's a better player?
And I think you need to have an MVP and a Player of the Year.
But you need to and I'm okay with the spirit of that.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what you think, Tyree, because we were on one side of the NFL MVP argument, and Danny was on another.
Yeah, that's fair.
But you have to have
because to me, Lamar Jackson was the Player of the Year, but Josh Allen was the most valuable player in the league.
But the NFL is already trying to do that.
Yeah, because they have the Offensive Player of the Year.
Basically, they have the MVP, which has become the quarterback award, and then they have the Offensive Player of the Year, who is the non-quarterback award. So
it's not really doing much dividends for him, but it's something.
Right, but if you're to try to do this to the NBA, and I like the spirit of it, to do it, you would really need to have a very, very clear criteria of what each of these things mean.
Yeah.
Because that is the issue that we have with these MVP awards right now, is it is
eye of the beholder.
Open to interpretation. There's ambiguity.
And honestly, boys, you opened up the conversation for superstar fatigue. That's essentially what it is. You don't keep giving it to LeBron because what? You're tired of it being LeBron. It's kind of the same thing. You don't want to give it to Jokic again because Jokic keeps winning it. It's a overall thing in sports that doesn't just straight go back to the NBA, that fans or GMs or owners of teams kind of have an overall tiredness about a certain player, and so they don't want to give it to him. And I think that relates to, you can go with the Lamars or the Josh Allens or the whatever, and then you can relate it to NBA with LeBron James, who should have won more MVPs than he has. It's overall just superstar fatigue in different sports.
I'm getting old and grumpy or grumpier, I guess. Go with that.
You're being honest.
I'm so tired of narratives. I'm so like
That's it.
Nikola Jokic is the best player on the planet. Stop. It's like, and SGA's been insanely good. He's having one of the best guard seasons basically since Michael Jordan. Like that's not even like a debate.
Question.
Like that's the level of performance that he's having is incredible.
If Jokic didn't exist, he'd be the unanimous MVP.
Yes.
He'd get every single first
But
place
the problem
vote.
is that Jokic exists, and even despite the juggernaut that OKC has been this year, if those two teams match them in the playoffs, you know who I'm picking? The Denver Nuggets. Because look, is there an SGA stopper on the Nuggets? No, there's not. But is there a Jokic stopper in the NBA? No, there's not. There's like he is inevitable.
Jamal Murray.
But I mean, it's Christian Brown. That's who they're going to.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, he's a fun little player and everything, and SGA's still going to cook. But Jokic is as inevitable as Miami Heat LeBron James. There's nothing you can do with, and I know a big part of the fatigue around him is the idea that he, quote unquote, doesn't care about basketball. He cares about horses and all this other stuff. He's a maniacal competitor. He's maybe one of the 5 most talented players we've ever seen in basketball. And I'm talking about like with Wilt in the list.
You can't not care about the thing and be that good at the thing.
Yeah.
Like,
show up.
It's cute to say, oh, he's kind of a goofball and maybe he's not one of the top, guys of all time, but we've seen enough of a sample size now. He's first of all, he's brought a title to Denver.
Yeah.
He's won 3 MVPs. He could have a 4th this year. I don't think it's going to happen. I sincerely don't think it's going to happen.
Bontemps for ESPN does his informal straw poll where he gets about 100 voters, and I would say that somewhere it's around 75 to 80% of the voters are the actual voters represented, and it's been pretty indicative. I think he's done it for about 4 years now, and it's basically predicted.
It's a good predictor of it, yeah.
Yeah, and a big part of it is the narrative, and I hate. It's like, oh, we're tired of this guy, so let's go give it to this guy. And like, well, if you do that, you should have done it before. That shouldn't stop you from righting the wrong of doing the stupid thing. And I hear Kobe fans, well, Steve Nash stole his. No, he didn't. Steve Nash was the most important player in the league that year. And like, that's the thing.
You can't rationalize with Kobe fans.
No, I know. They're the most irrational fans on the face of the planet. But like, there are these narratives that I just get so sick and tired of. And it's just, the Blazers, again, kind of to go back to the schedule, after they face the Knicks, Raptors, Wizards, they play the Grizzlies, the Nuggets, the Celtics, and the Cavs. Jason Tatum is very likely never going to win an NBA MVP. I don't think he's on that. Like, he's in the top 5, but there's just something about him.
5. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just not there. But you hear Boston fans say, "How is he not an MVP?" It's like, well, he's pretty clearly not as good as those guys. And like,
Probably not the best player on his team at nights.
On some nights, I mean, Jaylen Brown winning a Finals MVP was there, and I think that also carries a bit of a narrative too of Tatum not being that guy and everything that comes along with that. But you've got the Cleveland Cavaliers with Donovan Mitchell, who is probably 6th in MVP voting. I say all of this to say is the Blazers are about to play a lot of the top 8 players in the NBA over this stretch, and in order to close that gap, you probably need to get 2 of those games.
Yes.
The likelihood of that occurring, getting 2 of those 4, Memphis, Denver, Boston, Cleveland, it's not impossible, but it's very, 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 very unlikely.
Well, we haven't seen it yet. We just continue to see this Blazer team
Be close
be
and
competitive,
competitive.
be spunky, be game.
Now the flip side
Not
of
get
it
the win.
becomes we're close, and we're at that point in time when you face the Cleveland Cavaliers, you have 9 games left. The Cavs have seeding wrapped up. The Celtics have seeding wrapped up. Do you start be like, they're like, oh, we're on the road, we're facing the Trailblazers. We just saw both those teams rest guys against Portland. Does that
when the game theoretically meant a little bit more because they weren't as comfy? Because right now Cleveland is 7 up on Boston for the 1 seed, and Boston is 6 up on New York for the 2 seed. So those are pretty much a wrap.
Yeah.
Not worried about that.
No, and they might be trying to catch some rest. Now, Memphis on the other hand, Denver on the other hand, they are in a bloodbath. 2, 3, 4 with Memphis, Denver, Houston, LA. You have 4 teams.
2 games separate all those teams
Yeah,
right now.
and they play each other.
Yep.
I think the Lakers and Grizzlies play each other this week, if I remember right. But you look at like all their. This is the best part of the NBA schedule for the games that matter because the NBA has done a good job of being like, we're going to forecast some teams here and we're going to make them play each other down the stretch and see, kind of make those games matter. But even with that in mind, how many of those can the Blazers get?
Well, so my question is, do you see a path? I'm guessing is what I'm trying to hear. Do you think there should be a path in terms of that, or are we just kind of playing and see what the Lord got for us?
I think you're going to go full Malcolm from Jurassic Park. Life is going to find a way. They are a half game in front of the San Antonio Spurs.
I'm so glad you brought that. That's what a great quote.
I thought you were going to go with the other one. You were so busy asking if you could, you didn't ask if you should.
Yeah. No, I mean, also
very,
viable.
very relevant.
They are a half game ahead of the San Antonio Spurs, and I believe a game now, or a half game actually in front of the Bulls. Actually, I think they were
in Tankathon.
Yeah, I believe.
Well, while you look at that, here's my take on this situation. One of 2 things is going to happen. 1, you're going to lose to the teams you're supposed to lose to, and that's fine. 2, you're going to beat some teams you're not supposed to. You're going to make up ground, and then people are going to get excited again.
Blazers are a half game in front of the Bulls and the Spurs. They could fall back 2 spots and literally double their top 4 odds.
Yeah. So in Tankathon right now, San Antonio has the 8th best odds to the number 1 pick. Chicago has the 9th best odds. Those teams are virtually tied. They're percentage points, but they're virtually tied. Portland is 1 half game back. So let's say it flips, the winds of change blow the other way for Portland. Then you're going to have Portland potentially go above San Antonio, and then you go from a 3% chance at the number 1 pick to a 6% chance at the number 1 pick.
But more importantly, you double your odds from the top 4 from 13.9% at the 10 spot to 26.3% at the 8 spot. That is where the math is mathing very hard.
Yes.
You're doubling your odd moving into the top 4. Do you miss out on Cooper Flagg and very likely Dylan Harper? Yes. Yes, you do. But now you also put yourself in a position for an Ace Bailey, a VJ Edgecombe, a Kasparas Yakashionis. Like, you have a guy that is in the upper echelon of the draft and potentially, even if you don't, let's say you land 4 and Ace Bailey's off the board and you're looking at VJ Edgecombe or Kasparas or Trey Johnson, and you're sitting there going, we like those players, but we also like Ant, we like Scoot, we like Shaden, we like Tu. Is there a team out there that covets that player? And can we pair that pick with whatever salary that we have?
Little draft day phone call situation.
Look,
little Kevin Costner going on, huh? Not a bad movie. It's not a good movie.
I would just
not
say
a bad movie.
Great job.
I mean, that's how Deni Avdija became a Trailblazer.
Sure.
You know, you had discussions at the trade deadline, and once you knew where things stood, so much is going to hinge on the lottery and kind of what things do or which way things go. Look, I'm making no bones about it. When Joe Cronin said, I'm not going to take away their opportunity to go at the play-in, I fully believed him. I disagreed with him, but I at least understood where he was going with that.
I still think we're in a position where you can have your cake and eat it too, fellas, because early on when the season was not going well, and we're like, oh my gosh, Chauncey's going to go. We have no direction. We don't know what's going on with this Blazer team. We're like, hey, can you do this ethical tanking thing? And then we talked about this last night, Dan.
Yeah.
Then you get into a position where you win a bunch of games out of nowhere, and oh my God, the Blazers are competitive, and then they lost again, and then they won some games, and they played Cleveland tough, and they've been playing these really good teams tough, and here we are, we got 16 of these games left this season. Portland currently has the 10th worst record in the NBA. They've had a lot of development. Deni Avdija is a star on this team. Yeah. Toumani Camara is a defensive stopper. Clingan is enormous, and he's figured it out. And Scoot looks like he flipped the switch in his career, and he's going to be a viable
Shaden
player.
Is starting to
Shaden
ramp up.
Absolutely, and that's been, 2.5 weeks happening now? You
Jabari, the best three-pointer on the team.
Jabari he hasn't missed from 3 in 2 months.
Just as an aside to talk about the randomness of the draft order, I just clicked on Tankathon just once, and they're at the 10th pick right now. The Blazers landed 3rd.
So basically, if you want to drive yourself insane, you can go on Tankathon, which is the preeminent website for seeing
hopes and dreams.
Exactly.
Smash the button and just
You can simulate as many times as you want until your team gets in the roll. But you're saying you hit it once.
I hit it once. I do this on the radio pretty regular with Dusty, like during a break, like once a show.
Just for fun.
Just to see where it goes. Just so you can understand like how viable, even though the percentages are the percentages,
right.
You just don't know. And again, let's say the situation happens, and oh God, Philadelphia getting the #1 overall pick would be disgusting. Sending Cooper Flagg there would be gross.
Well, actually, speaking of that, is Cooper gonna stay in college? I wanted to get your thoughts on that a little bit.
I don't believe so, but I have some friends in college basketball who have told me that there is an obscene amount of money that is on the table for Cooper Flagg to return.
What does obscene mean?
$12 million. Which is more than he would make on his first-year rookie scale deal. Now, in this, you're not starting the clock
exactly
on the NBA clock, but you might also factor in there might also be some additional NIL on top of that. Like I know some people who have said, and I don't know if I believe it, but somebody told me you could see Cooper Flagg, Coop, get $20 million staying in college.
To play Duke basketball?
Which is an insane number, but not to give them the endorsement, but to give them the credit, Bovada currently has the odds right now.
I saw.
#1 go to Duke at +220, going to Washington or Charlotte at +550. So.
But what if Philly wins the lottery?
Or Houston wins the lottery, or like what there's so.
Or the Portland Trailblazers win the lottery.
Look,
Rose City.
All are possible.
And talk about ethical tanking. Maybe the basketball gods reward the Portland Trailblazers for the ethical tanking that is going on.
Marang, if you had $1,000,
I love him for saying that.
If you had $1,000 right now and you're like, you can put it down, even odds. Is Cooper Flagg gonna go to Duke or is he gonna come to the NBA? You put that money on Duke? Oh, get out of here! Come on.
Well, hold on. It would vary. It would depend on who won the lottery. If the Charlotte Hornets won the lottery, I think he would go back. I would put it at not a coin toss. The odds are that he would go to the Hornets, but I'd say it's like 60-40.
Is that bad? He gets to stay in state.
I mean,
well, I don't think he necessarily wants to. That's part of the problem.
Athletics, you're making $10 million a year now.
Well, I didn't believe
wild,
it or
isn't it?
buy it.
It's crazy.
But the folks that I have talked to and just different agents and people in college basketball, they do genuinely believe that there is more than a snowball's chance in Hades.
It's a non-zero's chance.
Yeah, and the fact that we're even having that discussion is kind of nuts.
Well, look what happened with Caitlin Clark. NBC because NBC had the Big Ten contract, and they were ponying up a lot of money to keep her at Iowa for another year if she was going to leave.
Because she had the COVID year.
Exactly. If she was going to leave. And I think they were going to offer some in the neighborhood of $5 million for her to stay in Iowa, but then the WNBA came calling, endorsements came calling, and now she's one of the most famous athletes in the world. So it is interesting because I think we're going to have more and more of these decisions moving forward when you do have generational, like a Caitlin Clark, like a Cooper Flagg, that don't just change the needle for a franchise, but change the complexion of a league.
Well, the money sign. It's the money sign that now has been applied to college athletics, which honestly, you applied it back then in like 2004 when Tebow was in there. I don't know if you even see them in the league because they're making so much money in the collegiate level. How do you blame a star being the most talked about guy in college basketball?
You don't.
He's about to make almost.
The thing is you don't. And I think this is a good way. It is, again, to go full Goldblum and life finding a way of basketball, and the NBA in particular, needs to have something to curb the egregious tanking that you've seen from the Wizards and Hornets this year. It's not good for the sport. It is the most viable way to accumulate talent, but it does nobody any good.
Well, dude, if Cooper Flagg stays at Duke because such trash franchises get the #1 pick, that is a big loss for Adam Silver. What a disaster for your league to have to wait another year for Cooper Flagg.
Beyond
disaster.
That, it was funny. There was a tweet circulating the other day from a Hornets fan of, go ahead, we're going to suck for years. See how long you can stay at Duke.
We're going to outlast you.
Yeah, and I was like, is that a threat?
You know what? Honestly, I mean, you
it's
see it in other.
You think about that, it's like, so you stay at Duke and you make $20 million and you don't start your clock, but the Hornets are the calendar circles back again. It's like, we're back.
Hey, look, guys, the game's over, but the night, it may be Monday. It's just getting started, friends. That's right. Let's talk about keeping those good vibes going with our friends over at Best Day Brewing. It's the fastest growing non-alcoholic craft beer brand. It's the ultimate post-game play. We get to enjoy a great beer without worrying about tomorrow because, let's face it, shaking off tonight's tough loss doesn't need alcohol. So fans, make every day your best day. Find your nearest Best Day Brewing retailer at bestdaybrewing.com. Okay, the committee got a fair amount of guff for number, 18 on our list? They didn't like Sergio being ahead of Steve Blake. We're doing the top 25 Blazers of the 21st century. It's number 17 tonight. Last night was Sergio Rodriguez. Number 17. Who else could it be but his running mate, Mr. Rudy Fernandez?
The sexier, not the only sexy, but he's the sexiest half of the Spanish Armada.
Wrong number, but 17. You got it
right.
Yeah.
Rudy was again part of that period in the same way that Sergio was, that revival and the way that they played, that he brought that one-ification. He hit I remember Brian Wheeler and some of his calls, I remember this game. It was absolutely
that moment
bonkers.
Was ridiculous.
I mean, he's just nuts. And I remember when, I'd come home from games with my dad and listen to, they replay Wheels' calls from the games, the big moments. And so many of them, he had there's just players that have this ability to rise to the occasion.
The flair for the dramatic.
And his game had so much flair to it. And the disgusting part about it was, and I still hate Trevor Ariza for this, that disgusting play that he had that really
undercut him.
Rudy after a game the Blazers were blowing the Lakers out in, and Ariza ruined Rudy Fernandez's back, and he was never the same after that. It took him a long time to recover.
Never the same athlete.
Never the
same.
Which
was such an enormous part of his game.
Rudy Fernandez was a freak athlete.
Did he win the dunk contest?
No,
he participated, right?
He participated. He pulled off the jersey for, oh my God, the Spanish star that was the first Spanish player to come to the league. I'm totally blanking on his name, but he ripped his jersey off in celebration of him. And he had a couple, but he missed the first dunk. And especially then, at that point in the dunk contest,
that actually mattered.
It mattered.
There was
and
a lot of good dunkers.
Oh, man. But, Rudy was a guy that had like a 42-inch vert. Like, he was bouncy. And he's that rangy size, 6'5", like, where you look the best. Like, 6'5" to 6'7" is the best dunking size there is. You're big enough to be impactful, but you're rangy enough to just show it's shade. It's the same thing. It's like, and the fact that Rudy played in the huge jersey with a super low cut, it kind of almost had like this cape feel when he would take off.
It accentuates it.
Yeah, it was just, everything about him was just, everything had flair.
Well, it's so funny because I don't want to quite compare him to current Blazers, but there's a lot of Deni and Rudy and a lot of Rudy and Deni in terms of, because, Deni was coming off the bench for a while.
International
player. They play with this, I think Deni plays with more ferocity and Rudy played with more, finesse sounds pejorative, but I don't mean it that way, more je ne sais quoi, even though he's Spanish. But there is a corollary between those two players because it's instant offense, but it's also instant energy. And you can see the crowd. And yes, these are very dramatic moments even for Rudy, but these are the sorts of things that he would do. And the Rose Garden at the time would erupt. And
so fun,
this is just the type of basketball that Portland is trying to play again, the moving the ball up and down the court. And it is kind of that Deni feel of pushing the pace. And Scoot has that to a degree, too. A little more ferocity.
Scoot is the guy that has the most flair for the dramatic.
Absolutely.
He wants to find the lobs.
He wants it, too.
He had the get to the other side of the rim and one tonight. Something to also highlight is Rudy Fernandez. Well, Steph Curry personifies the three-point movement.
I was waiting for you to bring that up.
Rudy Fernandez set the NBA rookie record for threes made with 159. He hit 3 in 33 consecutive games and made a 3 in his first 20 games in the NBA.
Hey, he was on the all-rookie team.
Rudy Fernandez was very responsible for the three-pointification of the NBA. He's doing this before Steph. Like, this was the first real push when, Rudy was jacking up threes, and you were just like, oh man, this is a different brand of basketball, but it wasn't to the point of 10 a game.
Yeah, this
He
is
was here for a
09,
short time,
10.
too.
Yeah, just a few years, Tyree.
And I'm curious. Quickly, we only got about 2 minutes left in the show. Well, there's another game for the Portland Trailblazers.
16 of them, in fact.
I know, but this one is against the New York Knicks. Your guy, man. Such tough coach is coming to town. Don't know if
Love
Jalen.
Tibbs.
Yeah.
No, Jalen is not playing.
Jalen
will not play.
All right, he won't be playing against the Portland Trailblazers Wednesday, 7 p.m. tip at home, the Motor Center. Make sure you guys go ahead and get there. We'll be here for episode 67 of the Rip City Wrap-Up.
Hey, we are going to go from the most hated recent Trailblazer of all time in Gary Payton II to one of the most beloved short-timers.
I wish he was
Blazers
still
history
here.
in Josh Hart. Having Josh back in the building,
best.
I love Josh. Josh is the best kind of sarcastic wisecrack. Like it comes off, and you're like, all right, quit, knock it off. But it's always in good fun, even when he's being a little nasty.
I love Josh. The other thing I want to see Donovan Clingan make Karl Anthony Towns cry. I want Donovan Clingan to be so physical with Karl Anthony Towns.
He doesn't like that.
He does not like that,
Cat
Tyree.
is also the kind of guy that can make Donovan's life hell.
Oh, absolutely.
By pulling him out to three-point line.
If Cat gets hot from three, Donovan's going to be in hell,
Yeah,
which is
tough.
it's going to be a fascinating matchup because again, it's one of those stretch fives and one of the best versions of it from an offensive perspective.
Yeah.
And also, Cat got a little more juice in his feet. He could move a little bit more. He's not a rookie like Don. So,
Well, not only that, Cat's a phenomenal post player. He does not get the credit he deserves for being how good he is.
Yeah, he's great. I just want to see him cry. That's
I
all.
know. And he's a guy that you can kind of put on tilt. It's going to be interesting to see what the Knicks can and can't do without the captain, without Jalen
Yeah,
Brunson, because
agreed.
they're going to rely a lot on Josh Hart to initiate a lot of their offense.
and you don't think Cat's going to be able to stop from crying if Donovan gives a little shove?
Joe would just like to see it.
I would just like to see it, yeah.
I like the fact that Joe is going full bully.
All right.
It's fun.
Let's see if they can bully on Wednesday. We'll see you guys back here for episode 67 of Rip City Wrap Up, sponsored by the good people of Dick Hanna Subaru. Appreciate y'all. See you next time.
Love you all so much.
Bye.